but.
Yeah, like, I'm not sure what to do. Like, I don't have a bunch of projects. We moved in, we only bought this house a year ago, and half the reason we bought it was because it was like pretty much turnkey. So it's not like I have a bunch of projects to do or anything like that.
I do have a bunch of projects to do, and I gotta tell you, I would be a lot more productive if like I had an actual job at the moment that was a little bit more like stable, because it's like when I'm able to like schedule other things sort of around that, I feel like I'm more productive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And like that's always been the case. It's not just like now I'm complaining that I'm procrastinating now, and it's like, oh, honestly, before the pandemic I was way more productive with other things, because you know some people say like if you have something to do, give it to a busy person. I'm just so like that, you know. It's just like it helps momentum me other things just go around.
For sure. All right, so we've got about a minute before we're going to get started here. So I just put us live onto YouTube, so we are live there. I'm putting up the rest of the links here, so that way I've got stuff to copy and paste into the chat group for everybody to go to click on. And then we will start probably in about 40 seconds-ish, something like that. I'll call it out for you guys.
Nice to be on here with people who just are going to get me, I guess.
Yep. We're all gonna try and find our group, right?
Exactly. I mean, I have other people in my life like that, but it's just sometimes it's like, it's nice to be in a place like this.
Yes. All right. All right, guys, I'm going to start us recording, and then we will be good to go. All right, so welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another PowerToFly virtual chat. My name is Meg. I'm part of the marketing team here at PowerToFly. I'll be your host today. I'm super excited to dig in on to today's subject, especially with our lovely speaker. But before we get started, we just have a couple real quick housekeeping items. So if you've joined us for a previous virtual event, this will be kind of repetitive, but there, feel free to tune out for the next 36 seconds or whatever if you'd like. So today and all of our virtual events are about you. They're about our participants, about our community. So please, to that end, very much feel free to turn your cameras on if you'd like. I very much appreciate seeing new faces now more than ever. But there's no pressure if you don't feel like, insta perfect, if you don't super feel like you want to be on camera, no pressure. You are also more than welcome to come off mute to ask questions, comment, add clarification to maybe a question that you submitted. You are more than welcome to do so. The only thing that I do ask is two things. If you are not actively speaking, try and make sure that you are still on mute. I'm going to be doing the same thing, so that way people don't have to listen to my bulldogs snoring in the background. But if you want to participate, please feel free to interrupt me, but don't interrupt anybody else. So if anybody else is talking or asking a question, or if the speaker is already speaking, we just try and eliminate that kind of cross chat or cross talk, so that everybody feels like they, have a chance to be heard, and there's not a lot of audio contamination for the rest of the participants today. If you don't have audio, or you just prefer not to communicate with audio or video, that's fine. You can still participate. You can put any kind of questions, comments, anything that you have into the Zoom group chat. I will be monitoring that, so don't worry. If you want to participate, but you want your question kept anonymous, that is also an option. All you have to do is select my name from the drop-down menu. So when you go to put it into the chat, instead of sending it to everyone, you'll pick Meg Alexander instead, and you'll send it directly to me. I'll make sure that your question gets raised. You remain anonymous. Doesn't matter what your reasoning is. We respect that. Last but not least, today's session is being recorded. So whether you can join us for 5 minutes or stay for the full 60, no matter what, as long as you registered for today's session, everybody that registered will get a link. It'll be emailed to you in about like 1 to 2 business days, depending on how long it takes the video to download. And we will send you a recording or a link to where the recording lives on our website. So don't feel like you have to take, crazy notes or worry that you missed something that was said. You can always go back and review later. If you don't want to wait the 1 to 2 days, that's fine. We are also streaming live to YouTube. So you can check out our YouTube channel where the video will be posted up there. I think we're live currently and the recording will be up within a couple minutes of us finishing today. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to cover. No, I think that should be good. All right, so without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our speaker today. This is Brigitte Farmer. Brigitte is, she works at Adobe in design and sometimes coding experiences, helping new users get started with Photoshop, XD, and other creative apps. Her professional training is in architecture, computational design, and structural engineering. So thank you for joining us today, Brigitte.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So as we dig into today's questions, or before we do that, I'm sorry, the one thing I do want to call out is that you can also follow Adobe on PowerToFly's website. So I'm going to put a link into the chat here in just a minute. And what that's going to do is if you follow Adobe, so the link that I'm going to put in the chat is going to show you any kind of open roles they have right now. It'll also be a good way to check out, kind of see if they have anything open that would suit you. If they don't, or even if you're just interested in Adobe but not really looking to move, at this exact moment, the one thing that I definitely recommend you do is click that follow button at the top of Adobe's company page on the PowerToFly website. What that's going to do is it's going to put you on their follow network. So you'll get an email alert when they post new roles, or if they're going to have updates like participating in today's event, things like the virtual career fair, our upcoming mini summits, all that kind of stuff. If you follow that company, you will be alerted when they participate in things like that. So it's a really good way to, kind of stay updated without having to feel like, you're getting like a really cluttered mini feed or something like that. The other thing that's really good to know about that follow network is that talent advocates from PowerToFly, that is the first place they look when there's a new role posted. If they need to go, sourcing client or sourcing talents for Adobe, that follow network is the first place they look because it tells them that whoever's on that network is actively excited and really would be interested in talking to people at Adobe about future careers. So especially if you go on that page, you don't see anything that suits you right now, absolutely click follow. It is a really good way to make sure that you find out as soon as possible when they post new roles. So I put that link in the chat, so feel free to check that out. And before we get started here, I do have a list of today's questions. If you want to, feel free to take a screenshot of this. There's 2 pages. I'll flip to the next one in a couple seconds. You don't have to. It's just sometimes our more type A attendees really enjoy knowing what questions are coming down the pike next. So I'm going to switch to the next slide now. So this will just give you an idea of what's going to be asked on today's chat, the kind of questions that we're going to be going over. And it'll also be helpful in case maybe you have a question that would fit in really well with one of these. You can either save the question till then, or feel free to just put it into the chat, and I'll raise it at the appropriate time. It can also be a really good help in case a question occurs to you and you see that we're not going to talk about anything like that. So that way okay, well, that's a question. If I want my answer today, I better raise my hand, come off mute, put it in the chat, whatever, to get your question answered. So as we get started here with the first question, Brigitte, this person had asked, how do you let go of fear in order to pursue your dreams? I feel like this is a really big question, but it can start with smaller steps, yeah?
Yeah, this is a big one. So thank you so much for asking that. I would say, that's a big one, actually. I need to think a little bit on that. I think that, at least for me, it's been a series of mindset shifts over time where I found that when I just practice doing something that I'm interested in, when I practice doing something that I'm passionate about, it's usually not as scary as I thought it was. It's not as bad as I thought it was. I don't get as much flack from others as I thought I might get. And so what tends to happen, at least for me, and I imagine it's for many people, is that in our minds, there's a tendency to kind of catastrophize the scenario. Oh God, what's going to happen if I, if I do this thing? That's the fear that's coming from that. And usually it's never as bad as our minds like to make it out to be. And so that's usually been my way of getting around that. And then another thing is in addition to the mindset shift, there's something about the focus on practicing. If and that's something that I've learned from a great many mentors, is that when it's framed as practice or when it's framed as play, your there's the stakes are not as high. And so you're able to really lean into it a little bit more without all of the fear kind of bogging it down. Yeah, so practice, practice, practice as a mindset to help me get over fear, for sure.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. And you're right, that mindset shift, you're able, if you're thinking about something as practice or as play as opposed to work, the stakes are lower. You're able to, proceed without that fear of a mistake, that fear of, messing up, and, it's a lot easier to kind of tackle something that might have seemed a lot more intimidating previously. So yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
all right.
I think there's, I just kind of on the same thought, I was just thinking like, there's something about, a friend of mine said when I was in grad school, actually, he said, and I've never forgotten this quote, is decisions exist to be made, right? And so you can make a decision that is, in the direction of the goal or the dream, but almost all things can be undone, or brought back to a previous condition. And so that kind of also, at least for me, that helps to reduce the stakes in my mind.
See, nobody ever believes me, or at least I don't think that I feel like they think that I'm just like kind of spinning words or, platitudes or whatever when I say this, but there's absolutely every single one of these chats I do, there is at least one moment where somebody says something and I'm just like, you're absolutely right. And like that, you already had one, so it's gonna have. I have a feeling it's gonna happen more and more in today's chat. But the decisions are meant to be made is huge. Like, yeah, you have a choice in front of you, but if you don't do anything with it, it's not a choice. So like, you have to take that step. Thank you for that. I'm gonna be thinking about that the rest of the day. I guarantee you.
Thank my friend Akoa. He got me that quote. So, yep.
Thank you. Thanks for passing that along to us. All right. So to move on to our next question, this person had asked, how do you deal with feeling that you aren't as successful as your peers in life when they seem so far ahead of you, especially when you're still figuring out what your passions might be?
Ooh, that is a good one. And that's one that I truly do struggle with. Yeah, and that's kind of part of my journey, is that I have this meandering path that there's definitely a clear thread among all of these things, but it definitely, when I, for example, if I were to compare one person's resume to my resume, someone who's kind of taken the, the requisite steps, has done everything in a certain order, maybe, the societally preferred order, if you will, it definitely may look like that at first glance. And what I'm reminded of continuously is that, especially in the social media world, and we're all in that world, whether we are actively participating or not, there's definitely that we live in that ether. We're all kind of crafting we're crafting what we want others to see, right? And so there may, like in say my peers, maybe they are, I don't know, 10 years younger than I am and are where I am now. They may or may not have had some of the same experiences I have, but perhaps they're not those experiences weren't of the same duration. For example, like a long job search, for example, maybe they had a 3-month long job search instead of a 2-year long job search. So maybe they have some of the same experiences, but they're not of the duration that would make it so that you're putting that out on your resume, for example, or in some other public forum. So I try to look at stuff like that, and the fact that we all omit or choose to say certain things, whether it's in the narrative to ourselves or the narrative that we put to the world. And so just by looking at someone else's, trajectory is not really enough for me to, it's tempting for me, it's tempting for me to say, oh man, I'm just not as far, oh man, I still have so much farther to go. But then I have to recognize, like, wait, they may be omitting certain things, or maybe they had other circumstances that I didn't have. And so when I look at my own situation, I can kind of step into a place of gratitude of being like, even though all of this other stuff happened, I'm still here. And that's a more empowering mindset than like, oh, well, I'm not as far as, XYZ ABC person. So yeah, it's taken me a long time to come upon that though, because I spent a lot of time thinking, and still, of course, like, I mean, no one's really immune to that. But I'm learning to spend less time worrying about the narrative that someone else has created for themselves and is now projecting to the world and how that relates to me, and more time thinking, okay, what are some things that I can do to make my own narrative even better? It's a really good question though. I have a feeling that was going to come back in my mind later on, but
Yes.
yeah, that's a good one.
So Devney is sharing a really awesome quote in the chat saying, "Why are you comparing your whole movie to someone else's highlight reel?"
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Thank you. That's
seriously.
Boom. Can that person come and talk? I mean, I'm done. That's it.
It's a really good way to put it. I think that's, and Talia is saying the same thing. Talia said, I think the hardest thing is the narrative gets validated by everybody else, so it makes you feel that way as well. And yeah, I mean, like, if you think about it from a, kind of a purely selfish position, your own life is the only thing you're ever going to see start to finish. It's the only thing that you have full, visibility on. You don't see everybody else's stuff. So you don't see their missteps. You don't see the, the changes that they made the last minutes. You don't see the regrets. People might present this very polished version of, here's my highlight reel, but that's not to say that everything that went into it was on purpose to start with. I mean, how many of us have lucked into a really great opportunity, or just gone a really long time without catching a break? It happens to everybody. And so that's not the kind of thing that you really see. I think that's a really good way to look at it. I always had, I had a coworker a couple of years ago who used to tell me that, that I was a rose and I was comparing myself to dandelions. And so when I was like, I don't understand that. I'm not a gardener. I can kill cactus, guys. It's my job. It's sad how skilled I am at this. I was like, I don't understand what you mean. I'm not a gardener. She goes, no. Roses just take time. It takes years of cultivation. The bush, the plant gets planted. It's not, it takes years for it to grow, but you're comparing yourself to all these dandelions that are made to do this real quick and on a short timeline, and then they don't flower again. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I think a combination, for me at least, a combination of remembering that we all bloom at different times and that's fine, plus the fact that all you're seeing is what that person wants you to see. It's a very important thing to keep in mind, especially if you are falling into that pit of, trying to comparison and compare yourself to other people. Even if you try and use it to motivate, it can't, keep in mind, it can still be kind of detrimental on the back end.
And yeah, and then just to kind of add to that, I know that there was a question, I think I saw one on burnout, and there's definitely something I'm learning, that there's a sustainability to whatever you're doing, right? And so someone could have, and I mean, many high achieving folks have been there or are there now, perhaps. You have this meteoric rise. And then by the time you arrive at your thing, you're just like, it's like you've run a marathon. And so perhaps, if I'm looking at that person's LinkedIn, or maybe someone's looking at my LinkedIn and is like, holy crap, meteoric rise, but I'm over here burnt out, half dead, injecting caffeine, on the daily, then you don't see that part, right? And so it's that the rise is not sustainable, and so it's almost just as bad, in quotes, as going much slower and still reaching the same thing. You know what I mean? It's yeah.
Well, absolutely, because then what happens when you've poured all your energy into the lead up, and you're not able to either enjoy it or kind of take advantage of the place you are now because you're just so burnt out.
One person that I really admire once said she applied this to sewing and drawing. It definitely also applies to writing, especially fiction writing and memoir writing and things like that. She said there really is no such thing as talent. What there is the people who are willing and passionate enough to work at one of those crafts for 10 years straight. Really, that's all it comes down to, is if that person was willing and passionate enough to practice that art form for about 10 years, eventually we'll have something good. But really, it's that, in those fields that I mentioned, really that's really what it comes down to. It's not talent. It's, are you dog good enough to practice those things for 10 years straight? It might, I don't know if this applies to all art forms, especially the ones where it's like acting or maybe singing, where like a lot of it depends on how you look to society. So I don't know about those, but
another thing.
Yeah, so it's like that's a whole nother issue. But definitely I think visual arts and writing, especially like writing creatively, I think it's especially true of those things.
Yeah,
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
All right, so to go to our next question, this person wrote in, I'm a multi-talented individual. While doing very diverse things has enabled me to figure out what I don't want to do, I still struggle with figuring out what my passions are. Do you have any tips for identifying a person's passions?
That is an awesome question. Okay, so this is cheesy, but I remember a poster or something that I saw, maybe not a poster, but it was like on a chalkboard. And it said, the work that you do while you're procrastinating is probably something that you should consider doing for the rest of your life, or at least, and maybe not the rest of your life, maybe that adds too much pressure. But there's something to that, I think. So I tend to procrastinate, not by inactivity, but by doing something that I actually want to do. That's my form of procrastinating. Some others have other, forms, maybe, completely checking out or, doing something else. But usually I think most of us, we procrastinate by doing something that we're actually enjoying and we want to do. And so I like that quote because it looks at procrastination in a different way. It's less of like, I don't want to do, or I am putting off something. It's more like, no, I am using the time that I'm taking a break from this other thing that I don't really want to do to actually do something that I want to do. And so I've kind of seen that quote as a way for me to look at my own life and just identify threads of things that I find myself doing, or perhaps things that I kind of naturally do that I don't really think about them so much. And so an example might be, I find myself every time every time someone asks me to, I don't know, look over their resume, for example. I'm just throwing out a random example. This is not necessarily my experience, but every time someone asks me to look over their resume, I find myself kind of like tweaking the layout of it. That's just natural. I don't think I am going to be giving you a design consultation on your resume. That's not a thought that happens. I just find myself naturally doing that. Or perhaps if when I start a new job, the first thing I naturally tend to do is to, I don't know, organize the office, right? I naturally see through all of this clutter. I'm like, that's gotta go, that's gotta go, let's fix that. There are things that you kind of like naturally find yourself doing, or perhaps even other friends will point them out to you that you naturally kind of are doing this anyway. So that's kind of, that's one way that I found to look at things that may not be, they're not like passions that I say, for example, like I love to write music. I love to write music. So if someone said, what's a passion that you have? I would say writing music. That's kind of at the top of my mind. Or what's a passion that you have? Learning about engineering. I love engineering. I could talk about buildings and beams for days. That's the top of the mind passion. But there might be these hidden things that you don't even know that you're good at. You don't even know that you're naturally doing. And once you kind of find those, I feel like that's kind of the gold that you can see, because then you can begin to say, okay, I'm naturally already doing a thing. Is there a way that I can maybe, I don't know, start to put out a feeler to see if that's going to be something that is interesting? Like for me, for example, I love architecture and buildings. And so I naturally take photos of buildings. I don't go out in the world with a giant camera on the back and says, okay, today is going to be a photo shoot. I'm going to take a picture of that building and that building and that building. I just move through the world like I normally do. I bike everywhere, I walk everywhere, and I'm like, ooh, sexy beams. Let me go take a picture of that, right? And so that's something, now I look back and I'm like, oh, I've been taking pictures of buildings for 4 years. There might be something to that, but it didn't start in that way at all. And so that might be one way. I mean, it's not the entire question, but there might be one way to investigate some hidden things that you did not know you were automatically doing, because they're not like, oh, passion project, I got lost into this for 4 hours. It's just stuff that's natural. And because it's natural, it doesn't feel like work because it's natural. And that can also become a passion.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. We've got people talking in the chat. Marissa is saying,
Let me open up the chat here. That looks good. Let me get that going. Oh,
right?
nice. This is great.
She's
oh my
saying,
gosh.
I heard of asking 5 people who you trust to make you a list of your superpowers. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Ooh,
Joelle
yeah.
also said you might want to ask someone who hasn't known you that well, as you know, to kind of balance out. I think that's a really good way to kind of attack the problem. I think the other thing that really stood out to me about this question was this person talking about how they've, you know, they're multi-talented, and so they find that they're good at a lot of things, but it's, you know, testing out those activities or testing out those things is what helped them figure out that they don't want to do it. Well,
Absolutely.
for me at least, like I find myself in this position a lot, and what helps me is to make a list of what exactly I didn't like about whatever it was. So like I went to law school a million lifetimes ago, and one of the things that you do during law school is try and figure out where you want to practice. And I was never able to figure out what exactly I wanted to practice, which is probably a good indicator that I wasn't meant to be a lawyer. But I was very adept at pointing out, okay, well, here's why I don't want to be an environmental attorney. Here's why I don't want to go into family law. Here's why I don't think that, like, I can tell you right now, I'm not very good at constitutional law. And so I don't think that's a good place for me to try and land. So taking that, you know, kind of taking that idea of why you don't want to do these things or why you don't enjoy these things can not only, like, yeah, it's helpful to know, you know, for those specific instances, but it can also then help you kind of extrapolate out and be like, all right, well, I'm not a morning person. I don't like getting up early. So probably, you know, first shift on, you know, like a steamboat or something is not for me. Maybe I'd be better suited for, you know, something that's a little bit more like late nights than early mornings. Joelle's saying, I'm good at a lot of things, but what ended up happening was I was able to identify a common thread that tied all my passions together. And as long as I'm always tied to that thread, then I can express that passion in multiple ways. I think that's also a really good way of looking at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely resonate with that comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw somebody a couple of days ago on, I think it was like Instagram or Twitter or something, had said something about instead of aligning yourself or tying yourself to a specific business or an industry, come up with what what kind of goals you like to pursue, or what mission is what you want to pursue. And it makes it a lot easier not only to do that at whatever job you're at, but also to know, like, maybe when it's time to leave, because maybe the job that you're doing is no longer helping you pursue that mission anymore. So it can help you kind of know when a place is a good fit, but also maybe when that fit is no longer as good as it used to be. I
love that. That's a great, yeah.
It's one of those things that, like, you hear and it sticks in your brain for a while. So yeah.
Right. That's awesome.
All right. So this person had written in asking, would it help to find the thread of a main overarching theme that encompasses all my passions and then branch out from there? So kind of like we're talking about. I mean, would you say that a lot of the jobs that you've held or passions that you've pursued in your life, would you say that they all tie into kind of an overarching theme, or would you disagree with that?
That's a great question. So I would say that they do tend to fall into really one or two buckets. I really enjoy complexity. So the harder, the better for me. That's just, so from coding, like anything that is almost, and I remember telling a friend this, like things that are cryptic are always just absolutely fascinating. Like mathematics, love it. Coding, love it. Languages, love it. Engineering, love it. It's like complexity. That's kind of the thing that all of these, at least most of my passions have in common. And so that's the thread. Now that is not really, that can be applied, that is very general, like that thread, something that's cryptic, because really anything that you don't know yet can be cryptic in its own way. But for me, there's kind of like a linguistic component, like music is a language, and I don't know, coding is a language, and the way that you think about those are modular and like almost code-based, or, even computational design, that's a language, right? In and of itself. And so for me, that's the thread that's running through mine. Lots of complexity. And I really agree with what I think you mentioned, the previous thing of like, the example that you just gave, where it's like, what kind of work do you want to be doing? What are the types of goals? And so for me, um, things that are a mess. I like things that are a mess because I'm a fixer, like, so if things are just all like, those memes where they show the power lines and it's just, it's just a mess and there's power lines all over the place. Like that to me is exciting. Like I get excited about the worse off, the worse it looks, the more I'm excited about it,
Yeah,
and so
I'm picturing somebody throwing a giant, like just snarled ball of yarn at you and your face just lighting up with this like
exactly.
new
That's
challenge.
me.
Yeah.
That's me. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense though. Like you talking about, you want something to be cryptic. You don't want it handed to you on a silver platter. But that, I think that a lot of people would hear like, oh, well, she likes music and she likes coding and she likes languages, and think that those are three very distinct passions, and they
All the
are
same.
to an extent. But you're right.
Yeah.
It's all, at the end of the day, it's you're immersing yourself in something that requires that to pick it up and learn more about it, you have to learn the language and you have to learn the new rules that apply to this world and the new, like what laws govern this whole space.
I love that.
But no, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. All right. So it might help for this person to try and figure out, like you said, like kind of find that overarching passion or that theme. But keep in mind, that theme can look really different from passion to passion. So
absolutely, yes.
Look for that theme, but keep kind of an open mind. Keep, think about it in the broad scope as opposed to, in the very fine details, and see, does this new opportunity align with what your passions are, or does it more closely align with stuff that you maybe don't like to do, or stuff that doesn't really like kind of light a fire under you?
Yeah, and I would just add on quickly sometimes it helps me to identify those threads, to think of these things almost like a Venn diagram. So say I have 5 passions, and I would just go through logically and pair them. What if I paired music and architecture? What does that look like? And just let your mind, I don't know, while you're waiting in line at the grocery store, because we have a lot of time on our hands to do that nowadays. These are great little thought experiments. Like, what if I paired organizing the office, I'm just throwing out random examples, and giving my friend really good advice? What if I compared those two? Like what overlaps are there, just like little thought experiments while you're waiting for the bus or, whatever. You can kind of think about them a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And plus, I mean, looking at it, trying to compare two very disparate things that really only have in common the fact that you find them interesting, I feel like that's where you get a really good idea from. Because it comes from that kind of intersection that maybe nobody else has really thought of before.
Right.
Devney had posed the question, are you pursuing this because you're good at it, because it comes easily to you, or are you doing this because you're passionate about it and you genuinely enjoy it? And I think that's a really good question to ask, because you can be good at something and not really enjoy doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's not a condemnation of it, right? Like it's a statement of fact. And just because you're good at something and you don't particularly like it doesn't mean you couldn't one day grow to like it or something like that. But you got to kind of evaluate these things for yourself, because, as Devney so very eloquently puts, if you're passionate about something already, you can develop that skill at it. It takes that work and that grind to actually put in the work to be, as competent at something as you are passionate about it.
Absolutely.
All right, so this person had asked, how can I tell when my passion is strong enough or mature enough to become a career for me? Should I use this passion to start a side hustle first to see if it is lucrative or feasible as a career?
That is an awesome question. So yeah, that kind of, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm all for side hustles. I mean, I feel like I came out of the womb with the side hustle, it was just like, just the side hustle life. And some of that is because there's not really been, this is kind of an aside, but I remember hearing about others talking, at previous jobs or, teenager in the restaurant, whatever, people would talk about how they're so excited to have enough money to start their own business so that they don't have to be bossed around anymore. Right. And that sounds great. I mean, for sure. And I just, and then, but for me, I had such a long job search that I didn't really have, entrepreneurship was not a luxury, it was a requirement, so it was like, okay, I'm under the pressure, right? I'm in a pressure cooker. I need to find something that will help me to make money now because I am, out of money and not finding a job. And so I think that there's something interesting about that approach to having a side hustle, where it's just kind of like a means to an end. And I don't necessarily recommend that approach if it can be avoided. I mean, of course, sometimes if you are under the pressure and you've been looking for a job and you've been doing everything quote unquote right, whatever society says that means, then, um, but I personally like when you can kind of test it out. And so for me, actually, I was doing an internship at the time. This is how I kind of got into design. I was doing an internship at the time. Of course, like throughout all of my jobs, I'd been kind of just poking around in design, but I was mainly doing architectural stuff, mainly doing computational stuff. And so I remember that at my internship, my last one before I graduated from grad school, I had been looking for a job for a while. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, And someone I was working with at the time said, you already have the skills. You already have a bunch of skills. You already have those. So just start using some of those while you look for your job. Don't wait for the world to validate you because it's going to take forever, right? Start doing something about with the stuff you have now. It may not be you want to be an engineer, but maybe the thing that you have the skills for right this moment with nothing else is to do really, really, really good design for people. And so I took a deep breath and was like, okay, I'm tired of, because at that point I'd been looking for a job forever. I'm not going to wait around for the world to validate me anymore. I have some skills now. They're not the passion that I had at the top of my mind of like, I cannot wait to do design. It wasn't like that at all. But I had the skills then to at least start that. And then a friend who was starting a startup, she was like, hey, I really could use someone to help me with my packaging design, my website, all of this stuff. And then once I got started with it, I was like, oh yeah, coding. I love coding. I did a lot of computational design for buildings. I can do the same thing for the web. Oh, wait, a new little passion, so it's like, and of course that was like a low risk project, right? It was not low risk, but not low risk in a bad way, but it was like, it was a friend approaching me. It was for her company. So it wasn't, I wasn't applying for a job per se. I was genuinely wanting to help my friend. And so that's a different motivation in my mind to do good work. It's not a good motivation of like, oh, my portfolio needs to look sexy so that the biggest companies can, that's not a real, in the beginning, that's not a real motivation. Like you just want to help your friend get her business off the ground. So it kind of takes your mind off of your condition and helps you to pour all of your talents and skills into helping your friend get her business off the ground. And then in the process, you learn, oh man, this is awesome. So I would actually, for this person's question, I know I'm getting long-winded and gesticulate here, but I would actually recommend perhaps not having it be a formal side hustle just yet. I would see if there are friends or acquaintances where there can be a mutual trust, where the risk is not so high, right? So it's like, say you wanted to be a baller web developer, right? I would try with a friend of mine, of course, agree on a payment. You don't want to be doing work for free, stuff like that, best practices. But I would start with a project where it may not be the activity that's the passion, but it may be you really want to help your friend, or you have a passion for your friend's business. And then that is a way to kind of develop the skill with a different type of motivation than just impressing a recruiter or just having a really sexy portfolio or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a little bit different. That's what I would recommend for that.
No, yeah. Absolutely. And I love that you focused on, or that you highlighted the fact that, starting a business and that entrepreneurship is very much a luxury for some people, and for others it's a necessity. Like it's a necessity. Yeah. You gotta put money. No choice. Gotta put food on the table. This is what you know how to do. It might not be, and that I feel like people hear entrepreneurship and they think passion project. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you have skills that you, like we talked about, skills that you're good at that you don't particularly love to flex, but you know, it might be a way that you can kind of get from, if not A to B, at least from A to a little bit closer to B.
Absolutely. Yes.
We've got a lot of people putting out really interesting tips and stuff in the chat. So thank you to everybody that's participating there. I do just want to say, if this, especially for the person that asked this question, if you are considering making your passion into a side hustle or whether it can become a career, I did put a link into the chat for a previous chat we had about a week and a half ago with Charlena Ortiz. So go ahead and check that out, because she talks entirely about connecting your passions to marketplace opportunities and how you can really evaluate that.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, well, because I mean, there's sometimes that like volunteering is going to fill that need that you know, maybe you really want to pursue your passions that way. And so that, you know, volunteering becomes the way you do that. And so then you've got, you know, kind of not necessarily more bandwidth, but a little bit less frustration maybe for your work.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like I like to look at it as you don't have, like, not all of your friends want to do all the same things with you, right? And so sometimes, like, I've got friends that I call if I want to go to an art show, and I've got friends that I call if I want to go out to like a festival or something. But they're not really the same group of friends, because my indoor friends don't want to go outdoors to a festival or whatever. But you know, I look at it in terms of the job you hold that you get paid for, and that's what puts food on your table. It doesn't have to be your end all be all. You can have it be the way you earn money, but it doesn't make it any less worthwhile pursuing just because it doesn't also meet like all of your other passions too.
Plus 1000%. I've learned this the hard way as I've tried to, or as I've been, you know, by circumstance, forced to monetize passions that I never intended to monetize. It's very painful. It's very painful. And so there's something beautiful about having something that you enjoy and that you're good at as your financial anchor and your, you know, kind of intellectual anchor perhaps for your job. And being able to really let the other things, you can monetize them if you want, but it's not required. I think that's the thing. You can choose if you want to monetize that, instead of it being like, crap, you know, I need a job yesterday. I have to now monetize my deepest passions. It's very painful.
Well, and that choice is part of the luxury. And then sometimes you have that in your life, sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't,
But yeah, it changes for everybody. I think it's very interesting. We've got people kind of throwing up what their passions are in the group chat here. Elizabeth just really desperately wants to be the next Martha Stewart. And I know that's a serious request, but I will tell you, remember what we talked about on some of these other questions. We didn't really see a lot about like how Martha maybe made wine while in jail. And we didn't really see a lot about like, the other thing that really kind of always strikes me about Martha when people are like, oh, it's just, I want to be the next Martha Stewart. Really? You want your husband to leave you and all of the only skills you have are homemaking skills, and so you create an empire based on it? Like, odd dream, but okay, sweet.
Fair enough. I was gonna say maybe minus the prison aspect, but you know, maybe we made her all the stronger.
Well, I mean, I know she and Snoop Dogg have a lot in common, and they're like besties. So like maybe if she hadn't gone to prison, she wouldn't be besties with Snoop Dogg. So like I'm just saying, there's upsides to a lot of things. You just gotta sometimes you gotta dig a little harder for that silver lining.
I think also we're in like sort of a golden age of food media where people didn't feel like they needed permission to become a food media mogul. They just did it. So it's sort of like, in many ways, it might actually be harder now to become the next Binging with Babish, but it's sort of like, it's easier to get started now than ever. It's just that you're going to have more competition now than ever. So like, I think they think of it that way, and it's sort of like, you just kind of let it flow. I mean, you know, Andrew Ray said he didn't plan to make money with it. He planned for it to be a fun thing he did after work, you know? So I think if you just go into it with that mindset, like, I'm not planning to try and monetize it, at least not yet. I'm just going to have fun and to see what happens. And it's sort of like, I think if you go into it with that mindset, it'll be great, because I think that it's maybe an easier thing to start doing, but also a harder thing to get a ton of money from at this point, maybe. So
yeah, no, I could see that. Okay, so this person had asked, what habits or mindset should I implement in order to have the best chance of my passions succeeding as my career? And this, I found this really interesting because I wasn't sure if it was more of a mindset shift that they need to, like, if it was more focused on the mindset or the habits angle, or if it's that, if it takes that crucial combination of the two.
This is a really good one. And this is one that pardon me. I've been really focusing on this, I would say, for the last 9 months to a year, really focusing on the mental fortitude required for these things. So one crucial thing, or I would say the first step really, and it sounds like, I mean, just reading the chat and hearing all the great conversation, it sounds like many of you all are already on that. But the biggest unlock for me is being aware of my thoughts. Like that is something that I've learned through several mentors and coaches and counselors and therapists, is that awareness is like the first step. And being aware of thoughts as just thoughts has been like the mind equals blown, to just see, like to just almost see your mind, you're looking from the outside, you know? So, and this is something that is practiced with meditation and with other, you know, spiritual pursuits, perhaps, or perhaps with running or, you know, whatever. So you can get into it how you like, but there's something just about being aware of my thoughts. And so, not necessarily trying to change them just yet, you know, but just seeing them as they are. That to me has been like, it's one of those little things that sounds so cheesy and so like new agey or whatever, but mind equals blown when I've been able to do that. And then the second thing would be, pardon me, have a tickle in my throat. The second thing for me would be to realize, at least this has been like just crucial for me, especially during the work from home period, realize when I'm forcing it. And so, for example, I'll wake up and I'll say, okay, on my schedule for today is, you know, XYZ. And for example, like if I want to do something, like maybe I want to make a cool engineering model, right, for this building idea that I have. Pardon me. If I start something like that at 8 a.m., it is unlikely that I will be successful at really getting into it. But if I start something like, if I get my workout in at 8 a.m., no problem. Like there's very little resistance. So noticing when I have when I have resistance to things and trying to plan around that resistance and when the resistance will be the lowest naturally, of course, without forcing it all the time, because I've gotten through so many things, lots of success, by just forcing myself to constantly work. Like these bags did not get here on their own. Like I just work all the time, right? Got coffee in the bank, you know, it's a mess. But what I'm learning is like, first of all, I'm aware of my thoughts. If you're aware of your thoughts, you're usually aware of your natural energy levels. And now we have time to practice this more than we ever did, because we're not going from A to B to C to D, you know, we actually have time to see like, when's a natural dip throughout the day? I know that for me, like I'm toast between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. gone. So that is probably not, you know, on average, not every day, of course, but that is probably not going to be the time when, you know, I'm probably not going to set up time on that 4 p.m. to do something that I really care deeply about, or do something that I find exciting, because at that time my energy level is naturally depressed, right? Or not psychologically, but I mean like naturally low. And so, excuse me, this tickle. And so, but I do notice 8 p.m., no problem. Naturally, that's a natural rhythm for me. And so I know that there's a whole thing about the morning routine and this and that, which I think is great. Those are awesome habits. But there's something to be said about just noticing your natural state. And then you can stop forcing things all the time, you know? Like, so I know that if I want to do something amazing, like, or something super creative, right? In the morning is for things like math, to-do lists, you know, tick it off, tick it off, tick it off. The morning is not for me the time to do highly creative pursuits. 8 p.m., I'm ready. Like I could be as dead, I could be so dead, you know, I could be falling asleep at it, you know, I could be like, this is 8 p.m. I get the natural wave back. That's the time when I'm gonna say, okay, around 8 p.m. is when I'm gonna set aside time to do something that I'm interested in, or to go after this really tough goal, or to, you know what I mean? So I've just learned to just stop forcing everything all the time because it's counterproductive. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're talking about something like a creative pursuit. If you're trying to force it, it's never as good in your mind as you thought it was going to be. It's the same.
Yep.
I picture the results from forcing something, like forcing like a craft project or an art project that I'm working on to happen. The results are going to be really similar to if I was strapped for time, because you kind of put yourself into that same
Yes.
like panic brain mode where, yeah, it gets done, but it's not enjoyable, first off, and it's not, you know, the results are never what you kind of thought they were going to be, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, is that if you have that, if you have that knowledge of yourself, to know like, okay, well, I'm better, or I'm less resistant to these kinds of activities or these kinds of tasks earlier in the day rather than later, then yeah, you can then find ways to kind of work within your own natural rhythms as opposed to fighting them, to kind of get not only more creative outlook or outcomes, but it would definitely be helpful, especially for something that's like coding can be so incredibly fiddly that you can completely deaden your brain to the point that you're not even really processing what you're supposed to be looking at. And so you're staring the problem dead in the face, but you just don't even see it because you're just so burnt out on it. So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
All right.
I think it also, just on the topic of like forcing yourself to do something, it might just help to know that some things are going to be work for some people, whereas some things are going to be play for some people. For example, I love reading, but it's work for me. Like, you know, but it's something that I really enjoy, so I do sort of schedule it out. Also, watching TV is work for me. And it's like for most people, they can just binge out to a show and just be mindless about it. That doesn't work for me. And I don't really watch a whole lot of like long-winded TV shows because I don't really want to put the time in. And like, yeah, most people are probably like their brains work by just binging Netflix for 10 hours, and that's great for them, but it's not me, and I'm not gonna like try and be that person.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so we only have 10 minutes left today. These always go so quickly. So if you do have a question that you guys wanted to ask, please feel free to come off mute and ask. You can put it into the group chat if you'd like. So one of the other questions that we were asked, and this one actually came up a couple times in various shapes or forms from different attendees. Oh, sorry. There we go. This person said, I live an interdisciplinary life that helps me dive into my many interests and passions. I'm worried this can be perceived as being a Jill of all trades, master of none, where employers prefer depth just as much as it is important to have a breadth of knowledge. How can you carve out a niche and not appear unfocused to recruiters?
Oof, that is a good one. That is a really good one because I struggle immensely with this. My LinkedIn and resume and interests are all over the place, and this question's hard. This question's hard because I'm not even sure that I've mastered this. I've just, yeah, I think something that is, I feel like something that's kind of on our side nowadays is that like there's interdisciplinary is in. I think that it's in, you know, it's like, it's seen as a good thing. Because it means that you've had to adapt a lot and merge things that may not have been merged before, or may not have a lot of practitioners at that center, at that merging point. For me, it's like design and numbers. You know, I professionally like to merge those two things. And so there may be less people in that area, but I think this is a hard question actually. And I don't know that I have a really good answer, but what I've found, I guess I can say I don't really have beautiful advice, and I apologize for that. But what I've just generally seen is that you would be amazed, like at least for me in my jobs, I am amazed how many times I use stuff that had that been on a resume, it might have contributed to this kind of meandering look, but I actually use it a lot. So an example is, I studied in Germany, and so I speak fluent German, and I worked as a translator for several years. Literally, just a couple of months ago, I was working with my team at Adobe to do some translations for a project that is now going into the German market. Never in my mind, especially like Adobe has offices in Germany, right? So I would never think that would ever come up as something that I would end up doing. We have an entire localization team precisely for that kind of stuff. This stuff comes in handy all the time. Or like, I'm trying to think of another example, like I don't know, like just something random, like writing on a whiteboard, for example. I don't know. Like I happen to be pretty good at that. That's not something that I advertise or whatever, but that comes in handy all the time for these brainstorming sessions. Like even now that we're remote, it's not the same whiteboard, but that way of thinking, like, I don't know. I'm always blown away by how these things that look random actually come in handy. Like especially like one of my manager always encourages me to do. He's like, tell us, like not like us as a team, tell us about the other things that you do outside of work. Like, just like, that's fine. Like, just bring those, like, let's talk about them. And so that means that if there's like something random at work and they remember, oh yeah, Bridget likes buildings, she would be the perfect person to talk about buildings in this random context that no one ever, but now people know about it. So it doesn't really answer the recruiting question. I'm sorry about that. But I have just generally found it comes up like somehow. How am I speaking German in San Francisco? Like what?
No, I'm right there with you. No, we had a similar situation with PowerToFly even just this morning. We had a morning org call, and Nicole, who schedules all of our chats, was talking about how one of her goals for the rest of the quarter, the rest of the year, I think, is to start moving us into podcasting. So these chat and learns would then be available in a podcast form so that you could, not necessarily have to be tied to your phone or tied to Zoom or something. You could just listen.
That's awesome.
Like listen to the podcast. Yeah. So we were all kind of spitballing ideas on the marketing team on the stand-up call. And okay, well, I know how to do this, and I listen to podcasts, so I can tell you if like the interface is normal, or just as user-friendly compared to other stuff that we've used or whatever. And out of nowhere, one of our events coordinators pipes up and goes, "You guys know I've had a podcast for the last 10 years, right?" And we're like, no one knew that.
It comes up, yeah.
Come to the table. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things that like, it very much dovetails with something else I had heard a couple of years ago, which is that life is a lot more manageable when you think of it as a scavenger hunt rather than a surprise party. So if you think of life as something that is you're going to continually be handed these new things to find, new things to learn, whatever, it's a lot easier to handle it than if you think of it as this party that you have to get ready for, and you don't know when it's going to happen, and you don't know what it's going to be. And it pulls, for me at least, it pulls a lot of the stress off, because I think, okay, I'm going to be learning the rest of my life. I'm going to be searching for that next thing the rest of my life. That's okay. You look at it more in terms of like the journey, not the goal or whatever like that. But I think it's really important to kind of think about that when you are looking at somebody who has a resume that appears to be, this like Jill of all trades, master of none, because you can do different things with your phrasing on your resume or what skills you highlight or whatever to pull out or call out the fact that like, well, yeah, these ideas or these skills seem really unconnected or really separate, but here's how I've used them all in concert in this role here. And actually one of these skills that you don't really think is related to, job A, I've also used it in job B like this and job C like this. So it's
that's a good call out.
A whole lot of it is kind of making those connections for the other person. So instead of trying to like write this resume that you think is going to impress these recruiters, write it so that it is easy to digest. So you have drawn all the connections, you have left this breadcrumb trail through the whole thing that leads that recruiter along that story so that they fully understand where you're coming from by saying, oh, well, yeah, I'm actually going to be really great at this role, even though I've never held this position before, because I have this skill and that skill and that skill, and I love this and I'm passionate about that. It's just drawing those connections. There's also a couple of really great people that had commented in the chat about having multiple resumes for different skills that you're trying to highlight or different jobs you're going for.
Sure.
10 of 10 recommend this, guys. It makes everything a lot easier. Start with your base resume, put all, like, brain dump, put all of your information into it, and then cherry pick to create, like I said, I was a paralegal for 5-6 years. I had a paralegal resume. I had an admin assistant resume. I had a general, like, retail resume for when I wanted to, like, you know, get fast cash, because they're always looking to hire for retail positions. Like,
money.
yeah, but did I hate that job? Yes. Was it soul sucking? Yes. But the money was just as green as everything else. So you do what you have to do.
Yeah, that's one thing that I like about LinkedIn. You know, with the resume, of course, the brevity is kind of the, you know, the MO, but with LinkedIn, you can actually put in projects. And this is great. Thank you, Meg, because you gave me an idea. I need to go and put in some projects and kind of highlight how I've been using these skills that seem random, you know? So LinkedIn kind of allows you to have that long form content that you may not be able to get on the resume itself.
Absolutely. All right, we are in our last minute here. So real quick, I know we didn't get to most of the questions that were asked today, but thank you to everybody who, who wrote in questions and participated in the chat. I very much appreciate it.
Chat is on fire. I love this.
Right? It's insane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the Zoom room going for about another minute or so in case people want to, like, grab stuff, you know, get information, whatever that you'd like. I'll leave that going. I'm going to throw up in here one more time the link to Adobe's company page, so you can go check them out there and, you know, see if maybe they have any roles that would be suitable for you. Bridget, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with before we sign off for the day?
Any last words of wisdom? Nothing's coming to mind, but I will. Yeah, I think the thing that I'm learning is to try to make it fun. So for some reason, like the forcing it all the time, the working 24/7, it's just led to so much burnout, you know, so much burnout. And I remember when I was job searching, you know, I had a 2.5-year long job search that was very rough. And so I imagine that there are folks on the call who are in the same position. And so I know that, you know, mentally, right, it gets rough. And I just want to encourage as much as you can to just be on the lookout for that burnout feeling, because it sneaks up and you think, if I just work more, you know, you start to see yourself as a problem, right? And that's damaging. So I just keep aware of your thoughts. You know, I'm not prescribing a fix necessarily. I don't have a fix, but I just remember that was something that was came out of the job search with a lot of mental repairing to do. Let's just say that. So just kind of be on the lookout for that kind of stuff and keep, you know, do what you got to do to take care of your mental health. Seriously, like, not kidding. Yeah. It's rough out here, so take care of yourselves.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Bridget, for joining us.
Meg. Yeah.
Sorry, my dogs have decided.
Hello, doggies.
It's time to bark.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us and lending us your expertise and your experience. It was really lovely to speak with you today. So thank you for that. And on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much to all of our attendees who came out and participated and asked questions and tried to help out with other people in the chat. We really, really, really appreciate that. I put a couple links up there so you can check out some of our upcoming virtual chat and learns that we've got scheduled for this coming week. You can also check out our past recordings. And if you have any further questions about anything, you are more than welcome to reach out. hi@powertofly.com is our help desk inbox. I actually check it, so please feel free to reach out there if you'd like. And we look forward to having you all join us on another upcoming chat and learn. So thanks so much, everybody.
All right, thanks, folks. Peace.
Thank you, everyone.